together to have a very important conversation centered around police accountability and the civil unrest that's happening right here in the United States. I love the fact that it's being hosted right here in District 25 by Bishop McNamara, who's leading the way. I believe in having sometimes very frank and unapologetic conversations when we talk about what we want to see in our community. And I'm glad to be here to be a part of those conversations.
Well, thank you so very much. We're so glad for you opening up the door and being open to this conversation and listening, which is a great part of dialogue. Our next panelist this evening is the Vice President of the Maryland State Fraternal Order of Police, Mr. William Milam. He also served as President of the Prince George's County Sheriff's Lodge. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Milam here with us this evening. Mr. Milam, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Will Milam, and I currently serve as both the President of the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 112 and the Vice President of the Maryland State Lodge of the Fraternal Order of Police. As a Catholic with two children currently attending CCD classes, I'm incredibly grateful to the Maryland Catholic Conference for inviting us here to discuss such an important topic. I think that we have a real opportunity to have a thoughtful discussion around topics of police reform and accountability. Policing, like any other profession, is always striving to improve upon the services we provide our communities. We are committed to evolving and perfecting our craft. At a time where some legislators from around the country, some in our own state, are blindly calling for defunding of law enforcement agencies or the repeal of basic due process protections afforded to police officers, conversations like these are far more instrumental in helping develop strategies that work for all Marylanders. While some are more interested in disparaging the work of our profession, police officers remain committed to a higher calling, and we remain willing to place our lives in jeopardy in order to help others. This is not and should not be an us versus them conversation. Police officers are interested in learning how we can best protect our communities, and conversations like this will help us find practical solutions to reach that end. So again, I'm very happy to be here, and I hope to be able to add to this important discussion.
Mr. Milam, thank you. Thank you very much for listening and for setting the tone with your remarks. Our next panelist is Ms. Renee Montel Joy, and she is the Chief of the Public Integrity Unit of the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office and a member of the Prince George's County Police Reform Work Group. Ms. Montel Joy investigates and prosecutes law enforcement, and she works closely with the internal affairs departments of various law enforcement agencies to ensure that the law is adhered to during the investigation and the prosecution of cases without compromising the investigation or the rights of the defendants. Ms. Montel Joy, thank you very much for making time on your calendar for this important dialogue this evening. Your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, absolutely. And I want to, again, thank you for inviting me. I told the state's attorney, Ms. Aisha Braveboy, that I was doing this, and she was very excited as well. I've been prosecuting and investigating police probably for the last 8 years. And, I want to start by saying that, a majority of the police officers do really good things for our community, and we are grateful and indebted to them for that. But on the flip side, there are cases where, we have to move forward and prosecute police officers. We investigate every police involved shooting or any police involved incident that results in very serious injury. And with everything that's going on in the country right now, we are very, very grateful for this dialogue as well, because we don't want to prosecute police. That's not our goal, but we absolutely have and will hold police officers accountable when they do wrong. We want to make sure that there is fairness and transparency throughout that whole entire process. And we also have a unique perspective, or I have a unique perspective in the way that these cases play out in court. You know, the federal law and the state laws are what's the word I'm looking for? They're very, they do give leeway to police officers. And sometimes it makes it quite difficult to prosecute. And I think the discussion should also center around it, and things that should be thought about when we're dealing with these things is whether or not as much leeway should be given to police in this situation. I know that federal law and state law and case law make it very difficult to hold police accountable sometimes. And I think that is, I'm very grateful to be able to bring that perspective to this group, to the police reform work group in Prince George's County, so that individuals can actually understand what goes into holding police officers criminally responsible and make a, you know, educated determination as to whether or not that should change. So, you know, we thank you. My office thanks you for inviting me here tonight, and I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much for being open, Ms. Joy, to this discussion, and for listening and for working with the community. We have a number of questions from the community, and it's nice that we get around the table and have this healthy dialogue. And so this last panelist that I want to introduce to you this evening, I have the pleasure of working with every day. Archbishop Wilton Gregory is the Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Washington, and he's a native of Chicago. Has held a number of national leadership roles, including as president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and as Archbishop of Atlanta, Georgia, prior to his appointment here to Washington a year and a half ago or so. Washington, D.C., the Archdiocese of Washington specifically has approximately 667,000 Catholics, and we are in 140 parishes and schools and housing and social services across 5 Maryland counties, as well as the nation's capital. Just recently, Archbishop Gregory and the other Catholic bishops of Maryland released a letter in June on racial justice, and Archbishop Gregory is joining our conversation here tonight. Archbishop.
Thank you very much, Paula, and to all of the other panelists, thank you for allowing this conversation to take place, because it's very important. Obviously, the social media highlights the unfortunate and too frequent examples of where police officials are accused and often have engaged in very aggressive behavior against people, particularly people of color. Our nation has watched as too many African Americans have been killed or seriously wounded in an encounter with a police officer. So the image is often skewed that the police community is dominated by rogue officers. And we know that's not true. We know that the overwhelming number of public officials and law enforcement are wonderful, generous, dedicated, and serious guardians of public safety. But unfortunately, the cases that garner the attention of the media and public attention are the examples that I am sure every police officer is embarrassed by, and unfortunately, it taints a wonderful community of public servants. So we need to talk about the other side. There's this example from Scripture that I'm sure all of us are familiar with, of the 100 sheep, the one who is lost and is in need of finding and restoring to safety, overwhelms the 99 who have not lost or been engaged in any activity other than being faithful. So I'm glad we have a chance to talk about the 99 rather than the 1.
Absolutely. Thank you, Archbishop. And that is where we start our discussion with these 4 panelists. I will generally put forward the questions we have received in advance from those who have emailed us at communications@mdcatholic.org. And then, of course, we welcome questions in our chat box right here in this Zoom discussion. I want to start with Delegate Barnes because we are here because you have a work group, an acting work group there at the legislature. And Delegate Barnes, I'd like you to just sort of begin us off with what is the focus? What are you focusing on with this work group? Why did you find it necessary? And what types of legislation are being discussed by your work group to address these reforms?
First start off by saying it's good to see the bishop here, the Archbishop here. He came to my office in Annapolis, so it's a pleasure to see him on this Zoom call. The purpose of the work group was formed because of the civil unrest that's happening in our country today. The Speaker of the House said that we need to put our arms around what's going on and come up with meaningful legislation that creates the reform that we all want to see and that we're all talking about, not only here in the state of Maryland, but around the country. When you start looking at the no-knock warrant and the untimely death of Breonna Taylor, the chokehold that happened to Floyd, and just so much unrest from there prompted us to now start having conversations around a statewide use of force, talking about the Maryland Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, mental health, training, and there are so many other things like body cameras and the storage of those things. So the work group itself has come together, and we have brought in other subject matter experts from around the state and the country to give us some insight on some of those things that are our constituents here in the state of Maryland are asking us to look into. So the work group itself has dived down and done the work to now start to figure out what types of legislation or policy that we can extract from that to be able to introduce during the upcoming session in January.
You're listening to the people, to the constituents, which is wonderful because this is what we've seen expressed even amidst the pandemic. We've seen people take to the streets. Ms. Joy, this is something you spoke to in your opening remarks. What are you hearing from constituents when they call? What are they saying in terms of their relationship to police and police tactics? Is this something you're regularly hearing about in your office?
Yeah, so that is definitely something that we're hearing about. I think a lot of the constituents that we're hearing from in Prince George's County, I think they really are have a strong desire for transparency in the process on how police are investigated, the prosecution portion of things, and they really want transparency. They want accountability when it comes to the wrongdoing of law enforcement officers. And I think the most important thing that we hear is, they want to be treated, all the constituents in Prince George's County just want to be treated fairly by police. And there's a real feeling that they are not being treated fairly. I think there is a fear that is starting to generate within the county of police officers just based on what they believe are unnecessary and unwarranted tactics. And we just want to ensure that there is fairness in policing, no matter, what your race, color, creed, or religion is, that everyone is treated fairly and that the process is very transparent. So I believe that the legislative process will be very helpful. It's a very helpful tool to ensure that from happening.
Absolutely, Mr. Milam. So this is as the representative for the police officers here in this discussion. Mr. Milam, I turn to you now. So just policing, the fairness, what they're hearing from constituents and the people, how is that being heard by the police officers? How are you looking at police reform?
We're hearing it too. And so, we want the same transparency. We want bad actors within our ranks to be held accountable. I don't think, I've been doing this job for almost 20 years, and it's my life's work. It's the only job I've ever had as an adult. And so it's personal to me to make sure that people who are putting on a badge and wearing a uniform and who are entrusted with a great amount of, authority are doing the job in a good and an honest way and upholding the values of the police department and of the sheriff's department. So you won't find any disagreement there with us. We want the same things. We want just and fair policing. We want accountability, and we want transparency. We just may disagree on how we get there.
And so that's the question. How would you like to get there? What does responsible policing look like? What does responsible police reform look like? Because I think that's the heart of what we'd like to discuss tonight. What is it that we can do? How can we collaborate? How can we address this? What would you suggest, Mr. Milam? What is the discussion amongst the officers?
Well, look, I think responsible police reform will involve all of our stakeholders, the community, the church, law enforcement executives, law enforcement rank and file, prosecutors, and legislators. I think that any discussion around police reform must include the very people who matter the most, and those are the people that are involved. And it is only from this place that I think we can have a responsible discussion around those reforms. I think that responsible police reform involves taking a look at what we want from our officers and what might better be addressed by other professionals. For years, police officers have been asked to be medical professionals performing CPR, delivering babies on the side of the road, saving drowning children, performing any number of life-saving measures on the citizens we serve. We've been asked to be counselors, arriving at the scene of domestic disputes or disputes between parents and children, and staying on those scenes for hours sometimes until the situation is mediated and both sides have a satisfying conclusion. We are asked to be experts on the law without a requirement for us to have a college or a law degree. We're football coaches, we're basketball coaches. We get out of our cruisers and jump rope with kids and deliver turkeys to families on Thanksgiving. We take kids shopping on Christmas and use our own money to purchase those Christmas presents for families we don't know. And when there's a serious incident, we expect officers to make the right tactical decision every time, to use force only when necessary and as a last resort. And that force must be used perfectly with no mistakes. And to do that in a split second, to make a split second decision that will affect someone else's life, their family, the officer's life, the officer's family, and to be error-free when doing that. Because if not, you'll be the object of public ridicule, shame, embarrassment, criminal prosecution, and jail time. An analogy that I often use, and this isn't from me, it's from an article I read over the summer, and I can't think of the author of the article, but when there's a school shooting or some incident where we want our officers to go into danger while others are running away from it, we want our officers to be German Shepherds or Pit Bulls, which are dogs that are mostly known for their aggressiveness. When that type of situation is not occurring, we want our officers to be Golden Retrievers, a more docile dog known for their loving and non-aggressive nature. It would be nearly impossible for any human being to flip that switch from call to call in a matter of minutes. But that's what we ask from our officers. And I think they do it really well. So I think that responsible police reform takes a look at what we need officers to be really good at and what we no longer want officers to respond to. what statutes are no longer, that we no longer want officers to enforce, and taking those offenses off the books. Police officers don't make the laws, we just enforce them. So as society, if we are saying that we no longer want to enforce, let's say, jaywalking or other minor offenses, then the legislature needs to take a look at that. I think that us taking a look at the laws that we're asking officers to enforce, and whether they're old and outdated or whether they disproportionately affect certain populations, is key to helping us solve the problem. What I don't think responsible police reform is having untrained civilian members of the community involved in policy-making decisions or internal investigations or the disciplinary process for officers. Again, in no other profession where the stakes are so high are we doing this. For example, if a neurosurgeon performed a brain surgery and that surgery didn't go according to plan and someone passed away as a result, if there were questions about whether or not there was a failure by the doctor to follow best practices, a panel of neurosurgeons or other doctors would likely be convened to investigate and to determine whether that doctor acted reasonably. It only makes sense that another brain surgeon would take a look at that. So someone who went through that same training, that same schooling, and knows that practice inside and out would be asked to sit in judgment or to recommend new policies to prevent future mishaps. I, as a regular citizen or layperson, I have no business sitting on such a panel or recommending or implementing policy changes for neurosurgeons or in determining whether that doctor acted appropriately because I don't have the training and education to do so. So an expert would be better suited for that. Currently, there's a push by some in our state to involve untrained members of the community in making policy-making decisions. In some places, giving civilians policy-making authority. I don't think it's wise to have an untrained person and ask them to decide on what police policies and tactics should be. I don't think you can ask a layperson to decide whether an officer's split-second decision to use force was in accordance with departmental policy or in line with their training and experience, because they simply don't have that training and experience. So I think we all should realize that it's going to be incredibly difficult to legislate out of policing bad human beings. There's no law that you can enact that will eliminate the human element. Just like there's no law that you can enact that will stop some politicians, for example, from stealing money from their campaigns or engaging in pay-to-play politics. There are laws that are currently on the books against that type of conduct, yet a small group of politicians still engage in that behavior. So in other words, if lawmakers themselves, the very people tasked with making laws, are still willing to break them, the very laws that they make, that should be an indication of how difficult it is to legislate out all bad actors.
It is a challenge. You have a challenge of trying to balance, and this is what Archbishop Gregory actually cited at the start with his opening remarks, that you have the few bad apples and that the law or legislation will not fix it all, but you're addressing how to actually address those officers that are the bad apples. Delegate Barnes, how do you weigh that with having constituents a part of the discussion without weighing in on that which they're not experts at, but to hear what they're saying are their concerns?
Yeah, I just wanted to push back a little bit because I think, we all take this very personal. That's why we're having this conversation. The Black and brown that are affected by those police officers that are not adhering to the laws and the rules are affected by their disorder every day. So everyone is taking this personal. That's why we are having conversations around police reform today. I think, when you look at the police accountability and holding them accountable and ensuring that we now get the buy-in from our communities, these types of conversations are extremely important. We know that in Prince George's County alone was known for police unbrutally force on their citizens. We know that in Prince George's County, the police department was known for systemic racism. We know that in Prince George's County, there were countless reports of police officers not getting uh, pay raises and training and so many other things that makes us come to this point today. We look at all the things that's going on around the country, which every state right now is having conversations around police reform. Every state is looking at ways in which we can strengthen our police department. I don't think, and I know that here in the state of Maryland, we are not having conversations about defunding the police, but we are looking at ways in which we can reallocate funds for mental health training and counseling and things that the police department should not be doing, but it should be done by other subject matter experts in those fields. So I think when we look at all of those things comprehensively, those are the reasons why our Speaker of the House and the county executive have put together these work groups to now start looking at these things in a way to strengthen our police department here in Prince George's County, to ensure that they have the tools necessary to be successful, to make sure that they have the tools necessary to have the buy-in of the community. That's why there was a community, I forgot, the community board over policing that was established to make sure that the police were doing what they were supposed to do. Listen, when you want to become a police officer, it takes you roughly 6 months for training and to get sworn in. When you want to become a doctor, you have to go through a 4-year education process. So the whole notion of accountability, we have to make sure that our police officers are trained, they have the mental health capacity, that they are well suited when they put that badge on to actually do the job that they have been sworn in to do. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Police reform in this manner has not been conducted for many, many years. When you look at even with the Maryland law enforcement and trying to figure out whether we should fix it or repeal it, those are conversations that we look at the difference between the rules and laws that police officer has and citizens do not. So those are the conversations that we're looking to have within our work group.
Which
I think
is important, Archbishop.
I think that one of the things that that we really ought to consider, and it takes us beyond Maryland, it takes us beyond Prince George, is the real fact that parents, when raising a young Black man, have to have the talk. Whether they are from Chicago, Southern Illinois, Atlanta, Maryland, the district. And I think most of you are parents, if not all of you. You know exactly what I mean. Yep. That for a young Black man growing up in the world today, or 50 years ago when I was growing up, the presumption was that your behavior had to be of such a nature that you would not be able to be unfairly attacked or subject to police oppression. And that's, that's not just in Prince George, that's across the country. And until we can get to the point where a young Black kid, a young Black man can feel safe when he's encountering a police officer, we've got to talk.
Archbishop, what role can the faith community play in this exchange? Is there a role for the faith community here?
Well, certainly. I think that one of the things that we as religious leaders need to hold up to our people is the need for an honest discussion on what the climate is. We need to be able to talk about that in such a way that parents can believe and then encourage their young people, young men in a particular way to believe that the police are there to protect them and not to oppress them.
Ms. Joy, how does your office step in here in the community and help with the dialogue between the police departments and the community to achieve exactly what Archbishop Gregory is describing as the ideal? How can your office be helpful, and how can we, the people, take tips from your office to have a healthy discussion and bring about real police reform?
So, I think one thing that all of us in law enforcement, because, as, police are law enforcement, prosecutors are also law enforcement. And I think that, just in going along with the discussion that has been being had, is that I think everybody in law enforcement or beyond really need to take a look at themselves, because I really feel like everybody has subconscious bias. We have predispositions of people just when we look at them. And I think a lot of times people are uncomfortable in discussing that and looking at that. We have preconceived notions with everyone that we see walking down the street. And I think until we sit here and all look at ourselves and really sit down and give ourselves an honest evaluation of what those preconceived notions are, I don't think there is moving forward from that. We really need to sit down there and do it. And I know that the state's attorney in Prince George's has been interested in trying to get subconscious bias training out there, along with also, I know, de-escalation training, which I believe, the police department does have. I think prosecutors should also have that training as well when it comes to subconscious biases as opposed to de-escalation. But I think it's responsible for our office to look at that when we see these biases, I think, come to play in our different cases, whether or not it's a drug case or a disorderly case or a homicide, whatever it is. I think we all need to sit down when it comes to the police, when it comes to our office, and make sure that we are honest with ourselves and that we are treating everyone fairly and not based on the preconceived notions that we have about people that we don't know. So, that's one thing that I would really, I know the state's attorney and our office really just want to push for that type of training and examination to go into specifically the police officers, because, and prosecutors too. I know, for example, the Department of Justice, I'm not quite sure under this current administration, but under the past administration had offered, even in the Department of Justice, subconscious bias training to its prosecutors. And, I think it's important to really, really sit down and look at that when we deal with people that we don't know. And we also think about that when we are coming up with police reform legislation.
Absolutely. Mr. Milam, is that something the police officers are open to? The training that Ms. Joy is talking about, where we can recognize and see perhaps what we're not aware of that's factoring into the job, because Black and brown communities are saying that these biases are influencing how police approach and enforce the law in the communities. Is training a part of responsible police reform that you can see and the officers can embrace?
Absolutely. I agree with Ms. Joy wholeheartedly. And it's something that we are doing. We already have unconscious bias training as a part of our yearly Maryland Police Corrections Training Commission requirement. We have to take that.
Has there been an adjustment to it, though, in light of recent months and the particular headlines that have brought people out in the streets? Has there been a look at perhaps doing that training differently with some other inclusions now that we've seen some things erupt in our society?
I think we should be constantly evolving to the times. And we've got to be aware of what's going on around us, and we've got to adapt to that. And so, yeah, I think that enhancing our training in any way that we can is something that we absolutely have to do. our citizens, their lives depend on. So we want the best trained officers. We want the best trained folks that are responding to emergency calls. And we know, like Renee said, that everybody, not just police officers, everyone brings their own biases into a situation. And so we've got to find a way to get that out of this profession.
Absolutely.
We're committed to that.
Right, right. How we see each other. Archbishop Gregory, you talked about how we see the other person, and this is a part of Catholic teaching in terms of recognizing the human dignity of each person that we see. You and the other Maryland bishops wrote a letter recently in June. Can you speak to that for just a moment?
Well, I'd like to speak to that in relationship to the letter that we wrote, but even more recently to the letter that Pope Francis wrote about calling us to be brothers and sisters to one another. It is that perspective of seeing other people not as threats, not as people who are hostile, but as brothers and sisters. If we can get to that point, and I'd like to go back to what Mr. Milam said, that there's a need for constant training to remove the blinders that we have regarding one another. I think Mrs. Joy said the same thing, that prosecutors also approach things from a particular slanted position. We all have blinders. And as soon as we can recognize the blinders, we might have the courage to remove them, or at least to open them up.
Absolutely. And that will begin to rebuild public trust. Delegate Barnes, how do you address this period now as we have this dialogue? How does that rebuilding of trust, public trust, begin?
Well, I think it's through dialogues like we're having right now. I think it's important that we go back to the old-fashioned community policing, where the community and the police officers are actively involved within those communities. You know, it's just disheartening when you see a police officer pull over a bunch of kids, and you drive by and you have 4 or 5 kids sitting on the corner. It's the optics that make people feel a certain way, or there's that discomfort there. So I think we have to get back to some of the things that William had talked about, them doing jumping rope and French fries and turkey giveaways and those types of things. We just must continue to build that trust. And I think in the Black and brown community, the trust has lost. When you see all the things that's going on around the country, it's hard to feel that you're being protected. You know, as a Black man, I'm 55 years old, and I tell you, when I still drive down the street and a police officer pulls behind me, I still cringe, and I put both hands on the wheel. And I think, you know, thank God that I have license specialty plates, which helps me out because I drive a luxury vehicle. And I think it goes back to what Archbishop Gregory said. You know, I have 2 boys who are 14 and 15. And it's unfortunately, I have to have that talk that every Black man has to have with their sons and daughters about what to do when you are approached by a police officer, and how you must say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am. But also understanding that police officers are human as well, and that they have good and bad days just like all the rest of us. But, you know, in some cases, some of these police officers feel emboldened because of the badge that they put on their chest, and give them a sense of power. That I think that's where it goes back to what I said that we're looking at the reform group, and that's the training and constant mental health training and the evaluation. You know, most Black and brown have a lot of trauma in their life, especially if they live in the inner city and dealing with all the unrest of drugs and prostitution. And most of these kids live in a single parent household. So they're dealing with social and economic despair every single day. And then those that are trying to get a quality education and on Title I and being teased and picked on because they're in the free or reduced lunch line. So all of those things compound the issues and problems that we see, that we need to get back to that old-fashioned community policing.
Absolutely, Mr. Milam, you said that's something that you already do and are looking to do. Can we hear from you in response to what Delegate Barnes is saying here in terms of perhaps rebuilding public trust in this moment of tension in our communities? What are you as officers looking at right now in particular to bring about some healing? You're muted, Mr. Milam. If you could hit your mute button. There we go. There we go.
Sorry about that. I think we have to look at everything. And I'll give you a couple examples. In Prince George's County, with the Office of the Sheriff, we have started a positive day program, day meaning deputies assisting youth. And so we send deputy sheriffs into middle schools, and working with the school staff, we've been able to identify kids who could benefit from some mentoring. And so those deputy sheriffs teach a lesson plan. They teach the kids how to march, and they teach them new avenues to deal with conflict resolution. We've been able to show that grades have increased, instances of tardiness and absenteeism has decreased, fights, suspensions, all going down. So that is a program that works. That is a community initiative that we're going into schools, and we want to get the kids, when they're in middle school, and show them a different way. Just in Baltimore, a New York Times report came out over the weekend. Sergeant Betty Covington of the Baltimore School Police started a mentoring program for young African-American girls in high school. That program is doing wonders up there, so much so that it was featured in the New York Times. These girls are graduating. Sergeant Covington is focusing on the things that they do well and enhancing those things. And so officers have a place in the community, just like Delegate Barnes alluded to. We want to be in the community, and we're constantly looking at ways that we can do that. We at the FOP, we hold a Christmas present drive where we have an end of year holiday celebration every year. And we ask everybody that attends to bring an unwrapped new gift, and we donate that to the community. We probably last year donated about $1,000 worth of goods to the community. And that analogy that I used with Thanksgiving, we actually deliver those turkeys. We take them to senior citizens. We take them to our community. We do, there's another program in Prince George's County called Christmas in April, where a group of officers, deputy sheriffs, firefighters, we go out to homes in the community and we fix them up. We rehab them, sort of like what you see on HGTV. And we rebuild these homes for folks that
are
need
very powerful. See, those are powerful connections. Tell us how you're addressing those complaints, though, that are coming in at the moment. Are you addressing those in a specific way? Those programs are fantastic, and people see those and they give them great comfort because you, like you said, you as officers are a part of our family. This is the truth, but how are you addressing those complaints that are coming in right now, or issues coming up in communities right now? Any program addressing that at this moment?
Well, as it relates to complaints, I think we're trying to be more transparent. Departments across the board are trying to be more open and honest, and some of it was born of legislation. We have opened up our administrative hearing board process. So when an officer is accused of wrongdoing, there's an administrative sort of trial that they go through to determine whether or not they violated administrative policy. That process is now open to the public. We publish it online. Anyone can come to it and witness and listen to the evidence and make the call.
Website so people can actually, what is the website so people can learn about that?
Every police department is mandated to put that on their website now in the state of Maryland. So you can go to any police department's website. Similarly, we have put our general orders manual, so our governing document online so that our public can have a window into what the department expects from their police department. We want you to see what standards we're holding ourselves to, and we want you to have a look at that. So we are, I could go on and on. We're doing a whole bunch of things as a result.
You're responding, and that's the powerful thing that I think people need to hear in this discussion this evening is the response to what is going on now. Ms. Joy, we got a question here from one of our people that entered it in the chat. What are the avenues for citizens to voice their concerns and opinions about police reform initiatives? Do you have anything in your office, a mechanism for people to feed back to you?
So in terms of like, we do have the police reform work group that Delegate Washington is part of, and he actually has been running those discussions, and they have similar meetings that are on YouTube as well, where I've spoken at them, as well as I know Internal Affairs for the Prince George's County Police Department has spoken at those. The county attorney was there. It's like all the big players that people want to hear from about the way that their agencies or their particular division works. So unfortunately, I can get the website and the information to you. I don't have it offhand with me right now, but
yeah, we'll add it.
Yeah, I can definitely get it. I know Judy Danzo from my department and from the state's attorney's office, it plays an intricate role in that, and she accepts all emails. Her email is actually on the state's attorney's office website as well. She's actually the point person within our office that's on that police reform work group, and she is more than happy to accept any emails from the community. And like I said, it's on the state's attorney's website. But I can definitely get you the information in terms of the Prince George's County Police Reform Work Group and how to view those meetings. But I do know they also take questions, and also they stream on YouTube for anyone in the community to look at.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Ms. Joy, I'm going to stay with you here. Your final comments as we get ready to close out our discussion. We're minutes away. It's a big topic, and you all have brought up some very good points. We have many who are on this Zoom discussion and who will watch it on demand. I come to you now for your final hopes, wishes regarding police reform, anything you would like to leave us here, your final comments, Ms. Joy.
I do. There's one thing I kind of wanted to respond to with regards to transparency. The Maryland Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, has great protections surrounding the personnel records of police officers. And I'm sorry, and I apologize, it's getting to be bedtime over here, so my kids are about to get loud. But they do afford a lot of protections to the personnel records of police officers, which a lot of times prevent us as prosecutors from being able to figure out what officers, we need to disclose to defense attorneys that have particular problems that the defendant should know about, like racial biases or misrepresentations of fact and things of that nature. And I think, I just want to put that out there on the table, because the questions that came my way were awesome, but I think it's very, very important to talk about that aspect, because I think that will help us. At this stage in the game, our office has been, really, debating with police departments in order to obtain that information so we can meet our discovery obligations and ensure a fair trial on behalf of the state, as we are required by law to do. And it's been a big sticking point because of the privacy and protections that those particular files are given because of legislation on a local level, on a state level, on a federal level. So, I just wanted to add that to the discussion. And as far as my final thoughts are concerned, I really, really enjoy being on these panels. And, you know, I wish I could meet you guys in person.
That day will come soon after this pandemic.
Yeah. And, you know I've known Will for years, and, you know, it's a pleasure to meet you, Archbishop, and Delegate Barnes. I know we've been on panels before, but, you know, I just really want to thank you, because I am just honored to be a part of this discussion, and the State's Attorney's Office is honored as well to be a part of this discussion, because we want to come to a place where there is, where Prince George's County Police Department and the Sheriff's Department and all those agencies, that people aren't scared when they come, that they embrace them when they come, that there's a trusting relationship. And I think, like we started out saying, that the only way to do that is to have these open discussions and all be willing to play our role and change where we need to change and demand change from the agencies that need to change as well. So I want to
thank you so much. We're closing in on time, and I do need to stop you there, but I do appreciate your participation. It's meant a lot to our discussion. Mr. Milam, quickly I come to you for your final comment.
Am I muted?
There you go.
Okay.
Got it.
You know, the police unions a lot of times get a bad rap for, you know, as some say, standing in the way. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Maryland Fraternal Order of Police to let you know that we're not standing in the way. We have the same aim as everybody else. We want transparency. We want bad officers to be held accountable, and we want good officers to be praised. And we don't want to stand in the way of that. So it's conversations like this that'll help us get there. And I'm happy that that you were that I was invited here to give our perspective. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. We will have you back. Archbishop Gregory, thank you for being here and for being a part of this discussion. Your final comments, please.
Well, Paula, a week from this coming weekend, so and I regret that I don't have the link necessary, but it's a nationwide ecumenical weekend that brings together local churches and local community police departments. It may be simply an opportunity for local churches to pray for the local officers. It might be an opportunity for coffee and donuts for all of the policemen who serve in that local community. But it's outreach like that. It's opportunities to meet an officer, to let them know that they are respected, and to hear from them that they are faithful and generous servants of the community. That will go a long way.
Absolutely will. Thank you, Archbishop. Delegate Barnes, I come to you, and thank you again on behalf of all of your constituents in District 25. Your final comments, please.
Yeah, I want to also say thank you for the opportunity. And I want to wrap it up by stating that I believe we all have more in common than that what divides us. Let me be clear. I think all of us are colleagues. All of us want the same thing within our districts or our community. But there are some fundamental things that we must start to look at and address. And I think Joy talked about, or Ms. Joy talked about one, and that is the Maryland Public Information Act. That is something that we must look at for those internal records of those police officers that we do not or are not able to look at. There will be some real fundamental changes within our police reform work group that is being led by Delegate Vanessa Atterbury. So I think there are changes that are coming. The community has spoken very loud and clear on some of those changes that they want to see. And it is my hope and goal collectively, we can continue to work together for the common good of our community to enact some laws that give the police what they want, as well as the citizens what they would like to see to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Because in my opinion, I think we must act on some of the things that are going on around the country to make sure that at least right here at home in Prince George's County in the metropolitan area, that our police officer has all the right tools necessary to do their job properly.
Thank you very much, Delegate Barnes. Please hold. We're going to all close in prayer. This has been a very fruitful discussion. We invite you all to continue speaking. We thank the Maryland Catholic Conference for pulling us all together, Bishop McNamara High School for hosting this virtual town hall. I'd like now to